Los Angeles contains more crazy people than any other city in the world, and more clever people, too. Whether the man I'd come to see is crazy or clever, I'd never been able to decide from a distance. Perhaps I could find out from up close. Having hired the smallest limousine I could find, I set off for the hilltop Shangri-La, which my quarry nowadays seldom sets foot outside. A man who built an empire out of an idea, he's changed the world, but he rarely goes out to see it. Instead, he makes it come to him.
Does she walk? Does she talk? Does she come complete? My homeroom angel always gave me my seat.
Judging from the latest issue, Playboy still hadn't given up on the idea that a naked woman is some kind of philosophical statement. But I couldn't rule out the possibility that this strange publication's founding editor was on the side of the angels, even if his idea of an angel had a lot of trouble fitting onto one page of the magazine. Hugh M. Hefner stood for free speech for everybody, and it soon turned out for everything.
Welcome to the Playboy Mansion. Please identify yourself.
Clive James to meet Mr. Hefner.
Thank you, sir. Go right on up.
Thank you.
Take your car out. Take it to a motel room. Take them all.
Admitted by the Talking Rock into the precincts of Hefner's playground, I was expecting to see at least a few traces of what the magazine used to suggest was a 24 hours a day orgy. But the air of respectability was overwhelming. It might as well have been Balmoral. Not a single nymph sprang naked out of the shrubbery. Not even the butler looked decadent.
Good morning, Mr. James. Why don't you come on in?
Oh, sure. What's your name?
My name's Philip.
Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Philip didn't look much like my idea of the average Playboy reader, but maybe the magazine was going for a wider audience nowadays.
Mr. Hefner will be down directly. Feel free to make yourself at home.
Thanks a lot.
Anyway, Philip left me alone in the neo-baronial lobby, and I did what any fully paid-up member of the National Union of Journalists would do in the circumstances. I snooped. Could this be the severed testicle of some previous investigative journalist? I strove to appear casual for the benefit of any possible hidden TV cameras. Hefner was a powerful man. You could tell that from the layout. The poor boy with the Puritan background had come a long way from the days when he edited the first issue of Playboy on a kitchen table in Chicago. What you couldn't tell was that his power was no longer what it had been. He wasn't down to his last million or even 100 million, nor was he short of toys. But in the last 5 years, the Playboy Corporation had suffered a succession of severe financial setbacks. The collected trophies were potent reminders that the urge which had started all this off was not easily quelled. Nevertheless, I had a look of sympathetic concern ready should the founding father of the Playboy enterprise, who was now in semi-retirement, turn out to be a doddering invalid.
Hello there.
Hi, I'm Clive James.
I've come to welcome.
No.
This is my lady, Carrie Lee.
Very glad to meet you.
And welcome to Playboy Mansion.
For a 61-year-old man who takes no other nourishment except hamburgers and drinks nothing but Pepsi-Cola, Hefner looked in dauntingly good shape. Certainly, as we set off to see the grounds, he seemed to be in far better condition than I was. Only the pajamas and dressing gown supported the assumption that Hefner was bedridden, and those he was famous for wearing at all times of the day. Also, he was out of bed, and there was the additional consideration that when he got into it, he shared it with Carrie Lee. A 24-year-old aspiring actress, Carrie Lee is the latest of Hefner's permanent companions and looks all set for a long run. Hefner is clearly besotted by her, despite, or perhaps because of, a discrepancy in age equivalent to the distance between the first flight of the Wright brothers and the outbreak of World War II. Hefner had a stroke not long ago, and he's under medical compulsion to slow down anyway. But whether in response to necessity or in recognition of the cooling climate in sexual permissiveness, nowadays there is more talk of monogamy than there used to be. Or perhaps the blow to Hefner's brain led him to the discovery that he had a heart. When Hefner published the first long installments of his Playboy philosophy, a relationship was something you had in order to get laid, the real aim being to meet a new Carrie Lee every night. If the philosopher now feels that one Carrie Lee is enough to be going on with, it wasn't hard to see why that should be so. And there are good reasons why Hefner should strive to present a picture of normality in a well-run house where even the animals know how to behave. Playboy's gambling interests collapsed amid rancor and mighty loss of revenue. The Playboy clubs have been shut down or franchised out. Overtaken by the competition it paved the way for, the Playboy approach looks so soft-core it's a pink blur. But a commission set up by President Reagan included Hefner's magazine in its definition of pornography, which did not help the sales figures. And the AIDS virus grows no less virulent, making promiscuity, which the back numbers of Playboy feature on every page, look like a back number itself. The empire was tottering before Hefner's daughter Christy took charge. Now she calls the shots from Chicago, while the patriarch writes his autobiography and lives a quiet life the man he used to be wouldn't recognize. If Carrie Lee was the key to his transformation, here was my chance to find out more about her. Hefner went off to his office to supervise the preparations for that night's big party, which I was vaguely hoping would fulfill the adolescent fantasies that Playboy magazine had put into my mind in the first place. In her underground gymnasium, Carrie Lee began the daily workout that leaves her looking younger than ever. I could think of nothing better to do than watch Carrie Lee build her body, even though her body was, as far as I could see, already built. What are you actually doing there?
Well, I'm trying to keep my tummy flat, and this is for the abdominal muscles, which gives you the nice line down here.
Yeah.
I do that 5 days a week.
Wow. Which machine are you going to work on next?
Let's do something for the legs.
Well, I'll be ready to cooperate in that. Just leave me to it.
Okay, right over here.
Can I sit up here and sort of watch? Yeah, you're in terrific shape.
Thank
Do you do this every day?
I do it 5 to 6 days a week. Actually, I do lower body 3 days a week and upper body the other 3 days, 2 or 3 days. Whew.
Did Mr. Hefner build this gym just for you?
Yes. I mean, other people use it, but it was just for me. He wants to keep me in shape.
Tell me about the real Hugh Hefner, the one the rest of us don't know.
He's like a little boy in a lot of ways. He's very intelligent. He's very sensitive. He's very caring and giving. He has a great sense of humor.
Was it love at first sight? You were a 19-year-old girl and this
yes, it
mature,
was. I
powerful
think
man?
more than anything, I was really infatuated with him. I mean, probably because of who he was and because he's a very sweet man.
So how did he, what's the word, woo you? Did he woo you?
We wooed each other.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. We saw each other across the room.
Yeah.
And just gave each other a little look, you know, that kind of look.
Was he suave or was he corny?
He was a little shy,
Yeah.
and I am too, actually. And it's funny, over the years we've found out that we have a lot in common. I mean, at first we didn't really think that we did. We both didn't think it would last. And it's just grown. I've grown, he's grown. We're both better people for it.
Tell me how he's a better person than I am.
I think it's easier for him to deal with women now. I mean, sort of on a one-to-one basis and as a friend. I don't think he really, before, could deal with a woman, you know, as a friend, as a companion, somebody that he could sit down and talk to, which I think is hard for a lot of men.
He's practically a family man now, isn't he?
Yes, actually he is. We have a couple of dogs and we have a kitten, and I feel quite motherly.
Do you ever feel motherly to the extent that you might have children?
No. Both of us would really we'd have to want to have it and know that we're going to be good parents and dedicated. And that takes a lot of thought and a lot of time. And it takes up a lot of your life. And I'm not ready for that.
You're the subject of men's fantasies. Are you happy to be that?
Yes, I've done that to myself. So if I'm not happy with it, it's my own fault. Because I never thought that I was an attractive child. And I always wanted to grow up to be beautiful and lusted over.
A lot of feminists would say you were letting down the side talking like this. Are you a feminist?
In some ways.
Name one.
Well, I think that women should get just as much money as men for jobs and things like that. And,
Are you independent?
I am in some ways, yes. But I like to be taken care of, too. I like the security. I like the security that Hef gives me.
Suppose as Mr. Hefner gets older and he goes on taking his energy from younger people, he might find a new, even younger girl.
He wouldn't do that. I mean, I'm not saying that he wouldn't leave me if we weren't getting along and I was doing things in my life that he couldn't handle or he didn't agree with, then he might start looking around. But I don't think that he'd one day wake up and say, I think I want a younger woman, just out of the blue. No, I don't think so.
Are you happy here?
Yes, I am. Yes.
I was enjoying my chat with Carrie Lee, but duty called. The message came through that Mr. Hefner was ready to be interviewed in his office. Carrie Lee insisted on taking me there through her pet patch of indoor jungle.
This is where we keep all our little birdies.
I see. Yeah.
Lots of different kinds.
Well, you know, they're birds, all right.
That's what they are.
During our trek through the steaming greenery, I learned that the party that night would be a very big deal, since it would feature nothing less than the announcement of the Playmate of the Year. Not even Carrie Lee had been Playmate of the Year. She had been photographed for the magazine without any clothes on, of course, but not as a Playmate, meaning she hadn't appeared in one of those enormous center spreads you have to unfold like a blueprint of a semi-rigid airship.
Actually, it didn't cost so much. I mean, well, I'm not gonna
It was a
say
great
so
honor,
much.
I was told, to be a Playmate, and to be Playmate of the Year was apparently like winning the Nobel Prize for Physics, with the bonus that the prize was handed over by Hugh M. Hefner himself, instead of the dreary old King of Sweden or somebody. And what happens when the Playmate of the Year gets announced? Does anyone know who she is yet?
I know who she is.
Hefner's life with Carrie Lee was clearly idyllic, so it seemed almost like bad taste to remind him that he had once preached and practiced a different philosophy altogether. But I was only in dreamland for a day, so I had to be blunt.
Everyone always assumed, rightly or wrongly, that the man who got to play with the Playmates was you. Were you a kid in a candy store?
To some degree, yes. But the Hugh Hefner that is relatively not known to the public is an intensely romantic person and very sentimental. So, while very obviously it was a kid in the candy store kind of phenomenon, from the very outset there was never any kind of casting couch nonsense.
In the first fine flush of liberty and indeed power, when you were Playboy was a success and you were a young tycoon and so on, were you a Don Juan in the sense that you thought of conquest? Did you have a black book?
Without question. I went through a period, first of all, I went through a very unhappy marriage, and I came out of that, still searching for my own, sense of sexual being. So I was dealing with more than one thing. I went into my marriage virgin, in the sense that I had slept with only one person before in my life, the woman that I then married. Right after I was engaged, my wife-to-be had an affair and told me about it just a short time before the wedding. That, in combination with the Puritan background, had a dramatic impact on me. And I am absolutely certain that a part of what lay behind the establishment of Playboy was a throwing off the chains of personal hurt and indignity, and simultaneous with that, a quest for some better way.
Did you ever run into a girl with a black book of her own?
Oh, sure, of course, absolutely. With, not only with her own little black book, but with code and things on them.
What did you think of a girl like that? What was your attitude?
I thought she was rather liberated. But I also think that the notion in terms of scoring is very limiting. And, you know, I passed through that stage of my life fairly early, because a kid who has a sweet tooth, who is thrust into a candy store and discovers that he is going to live in that candy store for the rest of his life, starts after a little while thinking about other things besides candy.
Did you get sick of the candy?
No, I've never gotten sick of it, no. Because essentially, for me, it's never been a sexual trip. Essentially, it's always been romance. It's really turned me on. In other words, and the remarkable thing, and for that I'm really grateful, I am as romantic a pushover today as I was when I was a kid. And I'm glad.
Let's go back to the beginning of the Playboy saga. What was the original concept behind the magazine?
All of the men's magazines after the war were variations on a true anarchy, and that dealt with a very macho kind of image of a man climbing a mountain, or playing poker with the guys, or you know, killing crocodiles. And my own interests were a good deal more indoor related, and so that was the concept behind the magazine.
So how did you raise the money for the first issue?
That's a very good question. I never did. I quite literally borrowed $300 from the Lakeshore National Bank, which was the bank that I had my checking account with, and I was working for a children's magazine at the time as a circulation manager. Then I went down the street to the local loan company, and with my furniture as collateral, at this point I was married and had a baby girl, Christy. I got another $300. I formed a corporation and set it up with two kinds of classes of stock, A and B. Half the company was mine for a penny a share. The rest I tried to sell for $1 a share to finance the idea. I then went around to anybody, friends, relatives, anybody that would listen to me, and if I had been successful, I would have sold $18,000 worth of the other kinds of shares. The reason that I continue to have between 70 and 80% of Playboy is I was never able to sell all those shares. I would get a few hundred here, a few hundred there. But the entire Playboy empire was launched quite literally on a total of around $9,000. And you really can't do that. It just happened.
I wish I'd been there. I would have bought a couple of shares.
Yes, well, there's been a lot of reminiscing from friends in terms of second thoughts. And indeed, a number of the pieces of artwork and cartoons and stories were purchased initially by not money, with shares of stock. And some of the people who invested just $100 or $200 at the time are millionaires many times over now because of it.
Why was it such an instant hit? What was it, just the girls, or?
No. I think that it was, that Playboy was the first publication to arrive at exactly the right time to connect an editorial attitude about the possibilities of what life could be like. We were in a post-war period. You must remember that after the First World War came the Roaring '20s, a party. And I had felt, growing up as I had in the Depression and in the Second World War, that I had missed the party. And that I had arrived the morning after when they were cleaning things up. And I saw in the period immediately after the Second World War, everything going the other way. Things were becoming very, very conservative. There was a strong anti-communist fear. that was fed very quickly by 1950 by the Korean War. And we had McCarthyism here and a tremendous amount of red baiting. And it was a time of very flannel suits and conformity. And I just couldn't believe that this was all that the future held, not only for me, but for the rest of society. So what I began to express through the magazine was this other notion about life, that life could be something more than a veil of tears, that life could really be fun, and put the emphasis on that. And I think that the pictures only enhanced that image. I think it was the combination of the pinup pictures in combination with the editorial point of view that really made the difference.
The picture you painted of the reader at the time, the typical Playboy reader, he was sort of, he was someone who was listening to Miles Davis while he was holding the collected works of Nietzsche in one hand, and he was overwhelming a beautiful woman on a circular bed under a masterpiece painted by Picasso. Now, the truth was, though, wasn't it, that the average reader was a pretty ordinary Joe. In fact, he was a scruffy guy like me. He was getting his fantasies fulfilled, isn't that right?
Well, I think that the reality ran the spectrum. In other words, the cliche concepts that we would project in the magazine, and indeed some of those lines sound almost like they came from my first introduction to the first issue, were intended to be almost a cliche, to point in another direction from the direction that everything else was going. And I think that the fact that Playboy began at almost exactly the same time as rock and roll is significant. I think it was a period in which there was political repression, and therefore the other avenues, sexual liberation with its social implications, the music, were seized upon by the young people, and very quickly we were dealing with a runaway hit that in which the pictures were seen as a key part, but it really was a lifestyle magazine almost from the outset.
What about in the centerfolds, which was one of your breakthroughs? Were they reluctant to pose like that? Did you have to talk them into it?
Well, one of the things that we promoted from the very early on, and it began really with the second year, was the girl next door idea of pinup photography. Nudes and pinups in the past had been glamour shots, movie stars, or if they were nudes, anonymous, beautiful body against sand or piece of coral or something. I tried to integrate the pictures with an attitude towards life, and what existed underneath that, of course, was the notion that nice girls enjoy sex just as much as bad girls, and that this whole notion of Madonna and whore is, this whole double standard thing is ugly.
But in those days, the picture the magazine was painting us of the life around you was a sort of terrific party where naked women were coming down water slides onto the dinner table. And so
I missed that one, but I understand the thought.
Yeah. But what you were really doing was working your head off.
And watching the nudes coming down the slide into the celery. In other words, I was quite literally burning my candle at both ends. I bought the mansion in Chicago in 1960, and the first Playboy Club began in February of 1960. And I did the first syndicated TV show, a variety show called Playboy's Penthouse. It was based upon a party idea in the fall of 1959. So that in those years in the early 1960s, I began to quite literally live the life. But it was a matter of, running. And it was during that period that are sometimes referred to as reclusive, in which I was living in a 70-room house filled with bunnies and celebrity guests, and there were parties 2 or 3 times a week. And was not ever really what you would really call a reclusive kind of life, or some variation on Howard Hughes.
The bunnies might be gone, but the playmates were still here. As Hefner broke off to deal with the preparations for the Playmate of the Year party, I could hear unbridled giggles from the grounds. Some of the playmates were at play. Always ready to research any subject to its depths, I set off to join them. But after getting changed, I found that I couldn't find the pool. Instead, I had to grope my way through some sort of grotto, which for all I knew led straight back to Hefner's office. Gleeful cries in the distance told me where the Playmates were. A reporter has to sneak up on a subject if he wants to catch it with its guard down.
Hi, girls!
Hi.
What's your name?
Marina.
Marina. What's your name?
Sherry.
What's your name?
My name's Donna.
Donna. Where are you all from? Where are you from?
I'm from England.
From England?
Yeah.
I came all this way, I find an English girl?
Why not?
What about you?
Longview, Washington.
Uh-huh. Donna?
I'm from North Carolina.
What do you do in real life, Donna?
When I'm not doing this, I've been extremely busy with Playboy right now, but I sell real estate in North Carolina.
Ah, you do? You
I
sold?
have my license. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And what about you?
I'm a waitress at a pizza parlor.
Uh-huh. What about you?
I'm an actress.
You're an actress?
Yes.
And you're English?
I'm English.
What do you think when the photographer says, okay, take your clothes off and do this, that, and the other? You ever think, hey, wait a sec, why am I doing this?
No, they don't order you to take your clothes off. I mean, they ask you to do it at your pace. When you're comfortable with it, they work you into it.
Yeah.
And for centerfold anyway, you know basically what the centerfold involves, so you don't usually turn up in your long johns.
I see.
You know, going to set anything. I mean, no, you know what you're doing. As soon as you decide you're going to do Playboy, you know.
What about your mum? I mean, what does your mum think of that? What does your mother?
My mother loves it. She gets waved at in the village.
Yeah. Yeah.
She enjoys the superstardom.
Would she have done that in her time? She had a chance, you think? I mean, or if times changed?
Not in her time, she wouldn't have done. But if she was around now,
Yeah.
my mother would.
What about your mum?
My mom would have too. She would have done it, but her family, she was more inclined to have a family at that time than pose, you know. But she would have done it if she didn't want a family ahead of that.
What about you, Sherry?
My mom told me it could ruin my life.
Yeah? Did she?
Yeah.
Really?
And I told her to stick to raising children and I'll do what I want.
Yeah? Let me put the feminist case to you, because there's nobody else in the pool who can put it for me, right? Because you know what the feminists think. They think that
We're feminists.
think they're all being exploited.
But that wouldn't be right at all because we're not being exploited. At least I'm not. I did this on my own, and
I did it on my own.
right. Exploitation is when someone makes you do something, or someone, you know, forces an idea on you, and that's not at all what I did anyway.
I'm loving it. If this is exploitation, you're like, it's wonderful.
It
It's
is.
not, but it isn't.
It's like someone saying that, you know how they put pictures of champion roses
Yeah.
in a book. Then if we're being exploited, then so are the flowers.
I thought I knew what she meant. As I treated myself to half an hour of decadence, preparations went ahead for the Playmate of the Year announcement party. Obviously, this would be an event of Barnum and Bailey proportions, but I still couldn't help feeling that those who accused Hefner of exploitation had a case. The Playmates were catering for male fantasies. Certainly 3 of them had just been catering for one of mine. The Playmate of the Year would be announced in front of all the important people associated with the serious business of girls taking their clothes off. I had to admit that this eager audience would include myself. For this one day at least, I was part of the dream world of Hugh M. Hefner. Having changed from his morning pajamas into his afternoon pajamas, he was ready to talk again.
I want to ask you about being a victim of your own success, because you started a sexual revolution, and is it possible that it overtook you? You started being outflanked by imitators who were ready to go further. I'm really referring to Penthouse and Good Shows. Is that what happened?
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. When Playboy began, it was never intended to be an under-the-counter publication. What I was trying to do was make sex acceptable, to say that sex is a nice part of life, and we've managed in our society, through our Puritan hang-ups, to kind of keep it in a closet. I think that in opening up that door, without question, there's been a tremendous amount, what has been called a sexual revolution has been truly a revolution, and it includes a great deal of exploitation and excess, and I have never been willing, quite frankly, to, or motivated to stay in the forefront of that, because that's not really what Playboy is all about.
Were you shocked?
No. I've never had any great problem with, in other words, I'd seen blue movies and things from childhood, and I must say that 20 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to me that X-rated films could be appearing you know, that you could go down to the local store and pick them up and run them on your television set. But I think, quite frankly, that all of that is a very healthy change. I think that the exploitation and the excess is a rather small price to pay for not feeling so continually guilty about our own bodies.
A lot of the feminists say that you're their arch villain, and they say that the Playboy empire has, well, the word they use is exploited women. Exploitation is what they say you stand for. And the prime example they pick on is the bunnies. Now, what were the bunnies all about? Why did you put the girls in those costumes?
Well, the girls wore bunny costumes because the bunny was our corporate logo. But I think that in this entire controversy over Playboy versus feminism, we have fallen into a kind of Orwellian newspeak in which words have stopped having any real meaning. And I think that when somebody says that a nude in Playboy or a bunny waitress in the club is exploitation, that's a political point of view. It isn't reality. And for a very long time, I had a great deal of trouble answering those kinds of critics because I didn't know how to answer, because it was perfectly clear that we don't exploit the human beings that are involved. Neither the women who are wearing the costumes or the women who are posing in the magazines. We treat them, as the record will rather clearly show, in a rather first-rate way.
I see the recent issues of Playboy have been carrying lots of ads for condoms. Has AIDS knocked the Playboy philosophy on the head?
Not if you properly understand what the Playboy philosophy is all about, because I think that it has been caricatured in many quarters as being, if it feels good, do it. But that's not what I was expressing at all. What I was really trying to say is that there is more to life than the rather repressive Puritan notion that life should simply be a vale of tears, and that you can enjoy life with some style and pleasure. But I also established from the very outset the fact that we really had to take a fresh look at the ethics and morality of sexuality, something that we've never really bothered to do in Western civilization. And obviously AIDS becomes one of the important elements in all of that.
Thousands of girls come through the mansion, through the magazine, thousands of them, and they don't get murdered. But one did, Dorothy Stratton. Now, I know she was murdered by her husband, but some people accuse you. They say that you give the girls generally a degree of success and glamour that they just can't handle. It's all too sudden. Now, is there anything to that?
I think you cite a perfect example. And maybe what happened to Dorothy is a little microcosm of an instance that will really make the point. Dorothy was growing as a person. I knew her for some 2 years. She was a very close friend. I cared a great deal about her. She cared a great deal about me. She had a number of friends here. Her husband killed her because she was having an affair. Not with me, but with a movie director. And the movie director turned it all around out of his own grief and pathology and described it as if it was something else. Now, if exactly that set of circumstances had occurred, but her success was not in the pages of Playboy, but was on the Broadway stage, there wouldn't be any question about the environment being suggested as the cause of the tragedy. The truth of the matter is the tragedy is classic in its traditional nature. It is predicated on the assumptions that are the most old-fashioned and hurtful that you can imagine, which is the notion that a man possesses a woman, and if she dares to leave him, he has the right to destroy his property. And that's what that conflict is all about.
Yeah, well, Peter Bogdanovich, the director in question, he says in his book, he implies that really you ought to take a share of the rap. Yes,
the only thing, and it is presumably clear that I've spent a great deal of time in giving all of my relationship with Dorothy, and in that context, every other woman in my life, a great deal of attention and concern in the middle of the night. There was nothing in the relationship with Dorothy, with Playboy or with me, that I am less than proud of.
Well, is there a link between pornography and crime? I mean, the Mies Commission, the Reagan administration generally, the evangelists, they would all like us to believe that there is a link between pornography and crime, especially violence. Do you think there is?
No. I think you can make a connection. I think it's possible in the media to do that. But no, it is the opposite is really the case. In terms of the commercial market, it is the violence in sexual, violent materials that is hurtful, not the sex. And there is ample evidence of that, and it's a kind of a red herring, because the truth of the matter is, in surveys of the present commercial market, you'll find that there is more violence in the GP rated films than in either the R-rated or the X-rated films.
You're looking back, you're 61 years old, and you admit it, you're ready to admit it. Carrie Lee is, how old is she, 24?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the generation gap?
I think that if you are in good health, that age has a great deal more to do with attitude than chronology. I really believe that's true. And I think that clearly, some things that get clearer and clearer as I'm researching in the book, much of my life has been devoted to not becoming a, quote, adult, end quote. Because I think I perceived very, very early on that what is passing for maturity in many quarters is a giving up on your dreams, a sort of cynicism, a sort of pseudo-sophistication, and it's almost as if you go from childhood into old age with nothing in between. So what I've done with my life, in a very real sense, I think, is try to hold on to a set of attitudes towards life that were there when I was in my teens.
Some would say that there's an aspect of growing up that you haven't faced because you have this attitude. That, for example, you never contemplated marriage again, is that right? Did you ever contemplate marriage?
No, not seriously.
Yeah. Well, it could be said that there's something that lies beyond happiness, and you can only really find out by submitting yourself to certain of life's experiences, right? That they're not meant to be happy, and by pursuing happiness, you've missed out on this knowledge. Do you see that attitude?
Yes, I understand that attitude, and I think I lived that life in a very real way for a while. But you're asking more than one question here. The notion to marriage, I think that marriage is absolutely essential for a great many people. But maybe it's time for us to recognize that there isn't one answer. That there isn't one answer in a lot of different ways for finding fulfillment, happiness, whatever you think it's all about. And I would say beyond that, that the notion that I have lived in a life largely related to fantasy, I can only say the world is filled with fantasies. They are hurtful fantasies. They set one nation against one another. They set one religion against one another. The fantasies that I believe in on a one-on-one basis and worldwide have to do with caring about one another. And nothing touches me more deeply than the things we manage to do to one another on this planet.
What is there left for you to do?
Well, what I'm getting the greatest pleasure from is a time of life that when I was younger I could not have imagined would be so delicious. I had, as you know, a mild stroke a couple of years ago, and that tap on the shoulder was, I called it soon after a stroke of luck, and it really was. It just changed my life. So much of our lives is like a train trip with a vaguely perceived destination that we're trying to get to. And we sit in a seat, and the wonderful world goes by, and it's a blur. And we keep thinking about that destination, and the destination is really death. What we ought to be doing is getting off that train and taking a little walk around and really relishing this incredible miracle that we're all a part of. That's my religion, that's my life.
Shoot away, guys.
Only that incredible miracle, the annual announcement of the Playmate of the Year, could tempt Hugh M. Hefner out of his pajamas and into a tuxedo. And what do you know? The chosen beauty was one of the 3 nymphs I had met in the pool. It was Donna.
Okay, we'll add the parents.
Right here, please. Big smile.
Very good.
Donna's party dress clashed ecstatically with the sports car, which would be only a portion of the bounty soon to be showered upon her.
We got it made.
Donna's parents had arrived out of nowhere, perhaps by parachute, and didn't look at all embarrassed. It was a big day for them, and the night promised to be bigger still, because now the whole world would be told the joyful news about their wonderful daughter.
Welcome to the Playboy Mansion, the 1987 Playmate of the Year presentation. And what better way to present this young lady than by the magic of modern technology. So if we could dim the lights and allow me to present to you our 1987 Playmate of the Year, Miss Donna Edmondson.
Donna's video was glossily professional and even witty. If she didn't mind, why should I? But even though I was a willing spectator, I couldn't quite suppress the reflection that one of the insurmountable paradoxes of the Playboy philosophy was being stripped bare. Why was such a nice girl laying herself open to the fevered imaginations of unnumbered lonely males? Or was that the whole idea, that it couldn't happen to a nicer girl?
I'd like at this time to introduce the man that will make the presentation, the chairman and founder of Playboy Enterprises, Inc., Mr. Hugh M. Hefner. Hugh Hefner.
Like the philosopher he is, Hefner rose to sum up the occasion in one pregnant paragraph.
As a man who has spent the better part of his adult life trying to make sex and the images of sex acceptable in society, I would like to express how really, really proud I am of what I think is one of the most remarkable erotic videos that I have ever seen in my life. Tonight, our Playmate of the Year is a 21-year-old lady from North Carolina, the middle of the Bible Belt, with her parents here, church-going Baptists as she is, holding traditional values, with a father who has been a subscriber of Playboy since his sailor days in 1960, who is proud to be in the magazine, and her parents who are here, who are proud to have her here. And on that note, I would like to introduce a very special lady, our Playmate of the Year, Donna Edmondson.
If Donna's appointment was meant to show how a sweet, unspoiled girl from the buckle of the Bible Belt saw nothing wrong in taking her clothes off for untold millions of drooling men, it was a triumphant success. Her pride filled the air like perfume.
This is a copy of the printing print of her cover as Playmate of the Year, and along with that, a check from Playboy Enterprises for $100,000. In addition, parked outside is a $40,000 Corvette, 1987 Corvette convertible, and I think we have some flowers for you too.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let you say something.
Everybody's asked me how to explain this night in words, and it's impossible. But I brought a list of people that I want to thank because I was afraid I would forget someone. Bill Farley, Michael Ann Sullivan, who works out of the Chicago office, for first noticing my pictures that I sent to Playboy, along with Gary Coles for all his help, and Marilyn Grabowski, Linda
As
Kenny,
Donna went on to thank the population of the United States individually, it was impossible to deny that in a cruel world there were worse things that could happen to her. If she had been conned, it had been with her consent.
First in my test shoot. And there's also another thing I wanted to mention, that there were so many other playmates in 1986 that were just spectacular. And it was such competition this year. I wouldn't call it competition, they were great friends to me, and I wish we could all share this moment together. They were really wonderful.
Just because she sounded so sincere didn't mean she wasn't.
And I want to thank Carrie Lee for being such a good friend to me.
Donna was moved.
A special thanks to Mr. Hefner. We wouldn't be here without him.
Mr. Hefner was moved.
And especially my mom and dad for their genetic contribution.
The earth moved. And Donna's parents, having seen their genetic contribution come to fruition, had no doubts.
Tell me, what do the local people, your neighbours, think of Playboy and all that sort of thing? Are they for it?
Some of them, and some of them aren't, you know. The majority of them support us. They've had a little negative response, but very little. I'd say 95%, 98% of it's been good. So.
What form did the negative response take? Did somebody ring you up?
Well, some of the people maybe I've worked with say that, you know, they wouldn't let their daughter do that or something, you know, which they're entitled to their opinion, you know. I just never have felt that nudity in it by itself is sinful, you know, there's nothing wrong with it.
Will she be safe out there with all that publicity? And
I'm sure they'll have security personnel around her all the time. I'm not concerned about her safety.
You don't think little girls threatened by this glamorous world?
Well, I feel our daughter's intelligent enough to take care of herself.
And one assumed that what Mr. Edmondson said went for Mrs. Edmondson too. A later generation of women has acquired a voice, but some of them still go on feeding male fantasies. A previous Playmate of the Year was convinced that whatever grief the exalted position might entail, she owed a lot to Hugh M. Hefner.
I'll tell you, he is such a fine human being, and I have known him 10 years, and I have been in all the bullshit. You know, I have been there. I was Playmate of the Year in '79. I've seen what happens to some of the girls, not always good, some good, but it can really decay your soul if you don't understand what it really is.
As my day at the Playboy Mansion wound to a close, the top Playboy's night was clearly just beginning. Good luck to him. I was a bit worried about whether Marina would stay in her dress and what would happen to me if she didn't. But otherwise, the whole experience had been no more threatening than a children's birthday party. The Playboy philosophy began by separating sex from reproduction and has gone on to separate eroticism from sex. The AIDS scare has merely completed the process by which men are encouraged to get tremendously excited about what they can't possibly have. Not even Hugh M. Hefner can live a dream. Not without living in a dream world. In real life, sex can go public only as art. For anyone who feels strongly about it, it's a private matter. If people who make love in public give us the chills, it might not just be because of our inhibitions. It might also be because of their coldness. If sex meant more to them, they'd keep it to themselves. Though Hefner has a point when he says that people are better off making love than killing each other, he can't spread the news without making it shallow. He deserves credit, though, for his perseverance. He has pursued happiness 24 hours a day, on behalf of all those of us who have to change out of our pajamas before breakfast. As Hugh M. Hefner gazed deep into the eyes of Carrie Lee, he looked like a man who had discovered a great truth. All he wants is for the rest of us to be as happy as he says he is. And if he says he is, perhaps he is. I didn't stay to find out. The Playboy Mansion had been a bit like Disneyland. A week spent there would have been too long. A day was about right, and a night might have been frustrating.